Rob Zink. Zwinck. Am I pronouncing it incorrectly?
Yep,
Zwinck?
you got it. Yeah, Zwinck.
Zwinck.
Mhm.
Okay. And I also have my team leader here from our tokenization and crypto assets group, Eric Spence. Um, and in light of our technical difficulties, I do want to get right into it. I am Dr. Keisha Waddell, the Executive Director of the Center for Blockchain Studies. And we have our blockchain consultants, CEO as well here, Cherie Warwick. And again, thank you all so very much. Oh, there you are. Hello there,
Yeah, I
Robert.
figured it out. I was able to press
Oh,
some things.
oh, we're all here. Oh,
Yes.
okay. It's so nice to see everybody. Well, great, great, great. Okay, well, in light of the time, I really want to get right into the questions. We recognize, also I wanted to say to you too, Robert, I wanted to congratulate you and the Safechain team on your on Safechain being named an outstanding startup by Columbus Business First at the 2018 BizTech Award. So congratulations on that. Congratulations on that indeed. One of the things we wanted to just jump right in on was, the fact that we understand as blockchain consultants that a key feature of blockchain is disintermediation. And Safechain solves the problem of wire fraud within a pre-existing real estate infrastructure with a blockchain solution. Can you just tell us a little more about, explain to our group how wire fraud works in real estate transactions?
Sure. Yeah. And actually, I have a slide I can bring up to give you like a sense of, it's a very specific form of wire fraud. And that specific form of wire fraud is called business email compromise. So this is where a fraudster will either purchase a username and password, from the dark web, or they'll, legitimately hack a realtor or title office's email account information and kind of lurk in an inbox waiting for transactional emails to come through. And then this fraudster will send an email, that appears as though it's on behalf of the realtor or title agency instructing the buyer or seller in a home transaction to wire money to the wrong place.
Like a phishing type of thing.
It is, yeah, it's phishing, and it's this BEC, or business email compromise, is how the FBI refers to it, as well as the CFPB. And it's growing, like over the past 3 years, it's grown over 1,000% year over year. So no, not kidding. It's like it's $1 billion problem, where at least an attempted wire fraud, because we're like neck deep in this as a problem. We're privy to a number of attempts, and the biggest cause of business email compromise for mortgage wire fraud is that lenders, title offices, and realtors are perfectly comfortable like sending and receiving wire instructions via email. Like the solution to business email compromise for mortgage wire fraud is to stop doing that and instead use a secure online portal. So an example would be, if I were to own, say, IBM stock, and I wanted my, broker to sell some of that IBM stock, I can't just send them an email requesting that they sell it. And I certainly can't send them an email requesting that they sell it to a specific person. Like, I have to log into a website, go through multiple factors of authentication. I have to sort of access something securely in order to do something that important.
Yeah.
In the home buying space, those controls are just relaxed. So, our SafeWire tool kind of provides that interface, a secure online portal for communicating wire instructions.
So let me just understand this. So that is a problem that you guys you were privy to, that exists pretty significantly in this industry, because that sounds like something that probably is an issue across the board, in which case this probably has applications for other industries.
Wire fraud.
If you have a portal now that allows for self transactions. One of the other questions we had is, how do you proceed with convincing the adoption of this kind of technology. Particularly, it sounds like that is a problem that within the industry, the industry agrees on. That's for sure. How did you guys prioritize, I guess, one thing over the other? I imagine there are other problems as well.
Sure. So, Safechain as a company, created SafeWire, our first product.
Okay.
It represents the authentication layer for like a much larger concept, which is a 30-second property transaction. So if you would imagine, like the National Association for Realtors estimates that it takes 52 days on average from, the time an offer is received to, keys in hand and possession is had of a house. So 52 days down to 30 seconds. There are a number of things we have to build. It's actually a pretty complicated problem too, So, but authentication is something we'll have to tackle, authorization. So, I may be Rob Zwinck, but I am not authorized to sell the Brooklyn Bridge to anyone. How can we guarantee a person is who they say they are and that they're able to do only the things that they're, allowed to do? This is where blockchain starts to come into play. And, part of your first question related to, disintermediation or like, working within an existing industry. One of the things which I'm not sure how well this analogy works, but it's like, I think of blockchain as really two different things. There's, over drinks, the kind of anarchy and libertarianism, and it's going to change everything, which is fun. And a lot of people get interested in blockchain for its sort of decentralized kind of democratic nature. On the other hand, it's like a sequential database that's immutable and kind of expensive, frankly, like for the operational costs. It's cheaper to run Oracle for the most part, So you have, anarchy, and then you have a sequential database, mostly immutable, that has a very like narrow and specific use case that, in the hands of an enterprise architect or a software developer, you could say, well, you've got a problem, here are the different ways of solving it. And sometimes those problems are solved with a blockchain technology database. So that's where, we didn't need blockchain for SafeWire. We do use it in SafeWire to kind of learn through the experience. But we did need blockchain for the auditor work that we do with the county governments. And frankly, we need blockchain to imagine a 30-second property transaction. Like its attributes are kind of required to, kind of turn the ship, which is a $36 billion industry in title fees, if that makes sense.
Yeah, my goodness.
I have one thing, Robert, that I want to just add to that. It's something that you said, and that, let's just be honest here. A lot of people are really freaked out about blockchain too. And it is, and part of the reason is because, of course, people can talk about the other past and the issues with Bitcoin and, was it used for criminal enterprise and that sort of thing. But it's also many people, when they go and they speak about blockchain, and just as Dr. Keisha was talking about earlier, with disintermediation, they're bringing it in to say, oh, it's going to completely, completely wipe out this industry, completely change, all of these companies are going to close down. And I think that, when people do that, many people are sitting there going, well, wait a minute. Why would I want this? Why would I want to invite this into my house then if I'm going to be deemed irrelevant? Right. So I noticed that you, and when I was reading just through your website and reading through your blog, that you have that one blog post about the machines are not going to replace us.
Yes.
Yes.
And I just want you to elaborate a little bit on why you chose that approach, especially dealing with real estate professionals.
Yeah, I mean, it has become a kind of a core tenet of how we do business, in that it's one of partnership, and we don't. And I don't believe that technology is going to replace like the, in theory, like I don't have to hire a realtor to buy a house, like I do, because it's like, I don't want to become a realtor and learn all of the intricacies. And frankly, like they know what they know a lot about it that I don't,
Right.
And as somebody who's been working in technology for, now over 20 years, it's like, I know what technology can do, and it can't do that. So I do think that there's elements of a title office, though, where paper is being printed, things are being faxed, emails go out. When a closing occurs, like literally a bicycle courier takes it down to the county office for, go to the auditor's office, then they take it to the engineer's office, then they take it to the recorder's office. And it just, doesn't feel like that's anywhere near as efficient as it could be.
Right.
So going into those relationships as, look, I don't like like effectively, like I can go to a title insurance company and say, like, you're right. Like this technology is not going to replace you. Like there's always going to be risk in property conveyance, but like, do you believe it's as efficient as it could be? And or maybe if I'm feeling tricky, I'll be like, do you agree that it could be made more efficient?
Right.
Planting that there.
That's psychology in there, absolutely.
It helps, and I think it's opened doors, and it's meant that where I think they would probably still open the door because we're credible in the industry, but I do think it makes the relationship more meaningful and has created an opportunity for more partnerships when it's clear that we're here to help. And some people might wonder or worry, like, they say they're here to help, but they might start eating my lunch.
Right.
We cross that bridge when we come to it, but but until then, I mean, I can say, yeah, intellectually, honestly, like we're here to sort of partner with those groups, and ultimately, if we can make things faster, cheaper, they're going to make more money.
Yeah, and I know that definitely speaks to faster, cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what, that kind of gets along to another question we were curious about too. What's going on in Ohio? What's going on with Ohio? Ohio has become the blockchain hub. What is going on? Yeah.
And I did have a slide I'll just put up here to give you a little bit of so that's what I look like without a tie. But in Columbus, is the capital of Ohio. It's right in the middle of Ohio. It has JP Morgan Chase has a presence here. It's actually the largest private employer in Central Ohio.
Okay.
In the good times, there's 20,000 people that work at this 2 million square foot building in Columbus. So that's where I came from. I was 13 years at JP Morgan. I left as an executive director, which was like a lofty title there. 97 employees, 3 countries.
Yeah.
I had a couple patents still pending related to the application of blockchain, like outside of cryptocurrency use cases. And what I kind of started to get really into blockchain, not the cryptocurrency stuff. Talked a lot about it. Participated in some fun hackathons and learned about venture capital funding. And just got to a place where I got tired of talking about it and I felt like it was a technology ready to actually have something like done with it, like I was ready to actually apply it.
All right.
So we've been fortunate, we're close to 2 years old, or as a company, we're 2 years old, but, I've been, I left JP Morgan a little over a year and a half ago. We won 2018 Seed Stage Startup of the Year for Ohio. We did complete the first official real estate blockchain transaction in the U.S. So this was in partnership with the Franklin County Auditor, which is where Columbus, Ohio is. We described 36 properties in an ERC 721 token standard, created all the necessary accounts, and then transferred them to winning bidders in an auction, a live auction.
Mm-hmm.
And then
concept.
We count Steve Case as one of our investors, and he founded America Online, and is sort of like a big enough deal that if he writes a blog, like Forbes will kind of syndicate it. So we've been in a number of different like interesting articles and stuff related to what we're doing. But so like what I think is happening in Columbus is I think you're seeing the result of probably some strategic investments from like Jobs Ohio. Also, Drive Capital was created by one of the partners at Sequoia Capital, which is like one of the big 4 VC funds. So they're here in Columbus and operate like a pretty big venture capital fund, NCT, Rev1. So there's money for early stage startups. People have the support and ecosystem to kind of try things. You know, it takes a lot for somebody to leave a perfectly reasonable job to try something like this.
Absolutely. Well, I'm listening, but I know your background, having done a little research about you, you're a developer and a natural developer, you know, according to what you shared in online, even from high school, right? That was something you were totally interested in. So I can see where you could definitely, you know, step back and say, hey, you know, I'm just tired of talking about it. I'm ready to put it to use.
Right.
And, you know, and again, because you are indeed a, you know, developer, you can take an idea and bring it all the way to fruition. You know, and just to kind of bring, you know, this is kind of a question I wanted to ask you towards the end though, but, you know, Black Blockchain Consultants is essentially an ecosystem of, you know, career and business opportunities for Black professionals who are, you know, blockchain enthusiasts, but who are largely not developers. You know, how might you suggest we best penetrate, you know, opportunities in the real estate sector in particular?
Well, so there was something that, you know, like I mentioned my, you know, thinking about blockchain as like anarchy on one hand, or like a kind of a boring sequential database on the other. I think that's not the best way, frankly, to articulate the difference between ways of thinking about blockchain. So I do think that helping people understand that like blockchain is not Bitcoin dark parking lots where people are buying Bitcoin for diamonds in order to buy drugs or whatever, you know, like really it's a technology. And then once you can kind of get people to wrap their heads around it, like its first application was cryptocurrency, but like what's its next application?
Exactly.
There's something really unique about real estate, which is most of the interesting data related to real estate is public. Like that's different than medical records. It's different than like helping with opioid crisis, or it's different than energy, or like, you know, reselling solar panel credits. Like there's a lot of privacy implications associated to pretty much every other cryptocurrency or blockchain use case other than real estate.
That is a good point. Yes.
Which is why, you know, we're convinced that it's you know, the next stop for blockchain after cryptocurrency will be like government records and facilitating kind of a more efficient protocol layer for title.
So,
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so you're actually stimulating my thoughts now in terms of use cases, you know, and communicating to others, you know, how blockchain could be useful, you know, coming from a public record standpoint. But, you know, I'm an educator, so, you know, credentials and whatnot would be those type of public type records that, you know, people would want to be shared, and they are out there already. So I will think of that in that.
Yeah, and this picture sort of takes it a step further, which is to say, you know, on the bottom, those are county courthouses, and then the top is the state house for Ohio. In the county courthouse, there are like 4 different, you know, departments effectively that participate in sort of authorizing a real estate title transaction. There's the engineer, the auditor, the clerk of courts, and the recorder. You know, those are all elected officials. They could all be related. Like, you know, there are 88 counties in Ohio. Like some of them literally are like family, or they could all be like different political parties, and maybe they have like long-standing grudges. Like they may not get along, and they'd be very like they have all kinds of reasons not to work together. And so, building a solution, and I think this is one of the key reasons why blockchain is so important here, is that if they don't get along, it's very difficult for the auditor to raise their hand and say, hey, I've got an idea. It's going to make us more efficient across the courthouse. I just need you to trust me.
Right.
Because the engineer would say, like, look, I mean, I don't trust you. Like, remember that time you got arrested?
Right.
So what we can say is like, look, like, continue to not trust one another. I mean, in some ways, this system of checks and balances was put in place to like put that segregation of control into the overall like a political system. Like it's meant to have checks and balances. The engineer has his own or her own stamp, so that the auditor has their own stamp, and unless that deed has both stamps on it, the recorder won't record it, you know? So to say like, look, you don't have to trust each other, but like, just like how in Bitcoin, which, you know, it's hard to argue. I mean, 99.99999% uptime. I mean, whatever Bitcoin like is, it's like working,
It's
you know?
working. Right, exactly.
So
Exactly.
trust the technology. And, you know, it's a modern technology. It's a new technology. Like I couldn't have asked you to trust it 10 years ago because it didn't exist. But like, here's this protocol layer. If you guys can agree to at least trust it, you know, you don't have to use paper anymore. You don't have to have a physical stamp anymore. Like you don't have to have a bicycle courier hand you the letter and then walk it down to the recorder's office. So to wrap that thought up, like there's a very real compliance automation play. Like wherever you see sort of like compliance controls in place, like separation of duties or segregation of duties, the opportunity for blockchain exists. And I don't think that story is really being told as often as it could be. That, you know, if you're a bank and you have 30 compliance officers or 30,000 compliance officers, being able to sort of like not only replace those manual controls with digital ones, but even better ones, I feel like is something pretty interesting.
And again, we like how I see how you're thinking there. You know, you're working within an existing infrastructure, you know, onboarding with where blockchain benefits, you know, existing structures. In which case, like you were just saying, or to your question, Eric, you know, how are they able to go in with this technology when largely you hear that it's something that's going to take the middleman out kind of thing. Well, when you apply it like that in terms of an application of efficiency and that kind of thing.
One thing I do want to ask Robert, and this is just one area of it, but title insurance companies, how receptive, Robert, are they to that? You know, I look at where, you know, you may have the realtor, the buyer. Of course, like no one wants to have, you know, no one wants to have wire fraud take place to them. I mean, like no one wants that to happen. But there is counterparty risk where we're all connected, where if this happens, hey, we all feel the effects of it. But the title insurance companies themselves, that's their job, is to make sure that everything is on the up and up. With this technology, it could potentially really affect their business. How have you looked at that?
So this, you know, my opinion there is that title insurance companies do play an important role in like removing risk from a title transaction. A title insurance policy protects the mortgage lender. So like most of the policies that the seller, like in Ohio, sellers usually pay the fees for the home sale as part of the negotiation of the standard contract. The title insurance policy protects the mortgage lender. You, as a home owner, you can actually open up get your own title insurance policy to protect your down payment, which is interesting, you know, because it's the reason why I think that's interesting is that it's really the lender who's like driving the need for title insurance. So if you buy a house and you pay cash, you're not required to buy title insurance. If you buy a house and you get a loan, you are. So the point of that story was title insurance companies have different stakeholders. Buyers and sellers, you know, are kind of the most obvious one, but lenders are as well.
Right.
So for a title insurance company to be kind of progressive in their pursuit of lower fees, higher transaction rates, like, you know, ultimately, if they can make a more efficient system, they keep more of those fees. You know, there's 10 big title insurance companies, 4 of those control 80% of the market. So the ability for a title insurance in that top 10 list to differentiate themselves, you know, it's a competition. So, you know, I think that most, or if not all, of the title insurance companies are interested in the application of blockchain, if for nothing else, to kind of keep an eye on what the future might look like.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. I did have one question, and this is just, it's a little bit of a detour, but obviously with you being there in Ohio in the real estate industry, real estate blockchain connection, and that is the STOs. Obviously, I think we've seen the huge use case that just took place in Manhattan, where I think it was a condo complex was tokenized. I think we had the St. Regis in Colorado. It was tokenized a couple weeks ago. I was at Tokenized LA, a meetup, and there were quite a few people that were in the space, and they're looking to tokenize large portions of real estate. How is that happening in Ohio? Have you seen that?
I guess I haven't seen it. I mean, I'm familiar with it, and I would say that I think this, like a tokenizing property, effectively feels a lot like real estate investment trusts or like a properly run LLC. So like if you and a bunch of people decided, like as you're aware, decided to buy a property and go in it together, you could do that with like a standard not standard contract, but like you could, there's precedent for that. I think that the challenge with the tokenization of assets is I think that there's still like that legal underpinning that creates a certain degree of uncertainty. Like if the property were to burn down and now the insurance company's going to pay, like they're going to look at the deed that's at the recorder's office and see whose name's on it. And maybe it's an LLC that talks a whole bunch about tokens, but nothing is going to force whoever receives that check to give it to everybody who owns a token, So I think there's just a decent amount of ambiguity, and and I think it's reasonable to think about that type of control making organizations that own common assets more enforceable. But like the path to get there is much longer than a smart contract and a bunch of Ethereum accounts. Like I think we'll see people getting like ripped off before we'll see like people not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. At least I hope not, but
but yeah, probably right, because that's a good point.
So and I should also say, like when I think about title being kind of the next stop, I think that blockchain is going to have like many stops along the way. It's sort of a 10-year-old technology, and I don't even think I didn't hear the term smart contract until 5 years ago. Like that's pretty young for brand new like technology. Another way I think it's kind of interesting to talk about is Alan Kay is a computer scientist who was head of Xerox PARC when they made like the laser printer, the mouse, the graphical user interface, like essentially all these amazing things in the like late 60s, early 70s, And as somebody who's, been around, like I've been around mainframes, I've done large scale, low latency, high throughput systems at JP Morgan. You kind of take the same tools and sort of make the same type of technology. It's different scale. Like you might do it on a whole bunch of little servers. You might do it on one big giant server, but it's like, it's still the same patterns. It's like databases, messaging layer, services, and all here comes blockchain. It's like, well, is this new? Do I now have like 7 tools in my toolkit, or is it just sort of like another way of talking about it? And I'm convinced it is new. It's like, it's something novel. It's in a world of computers that really were just getting kind of like cheaper and faster and smaller. Here's this like new, genuinely new tool. As it's applied in different industries, I think like it's exciting to think of what the future holds. And I think the tokenization of property is one of those places, but yeah, officially, it just feels like there are other sort of things along the way that need to be solved before it's something that will like be truly legitimate, and from my perspective,
Yes, and at the meetup a couple of weeks ago, that was one of the main points that everyone did bring up, was understanding the legalities and when it came down to ownership. And it seems like we're going to be almost in a fluid space with this, where for some people, ownership will mean this, but for others, it will mean something completely different.
Yep. Yeah, and there was another like thing I think about, and especially when you now have heard my I'm very enthusiastic about applying blockchain, sort of taking this technology as it is right now. I'm not waiting on new cryptography. I'm not waiting on new proof of stake algorithms. Like, I'm using Ethereum as it is right now to do everything we do. I'm like relatively constantly reminded of, there's this quote, Aristotle, it's like, for the things that we learn by doing, we learn by doing. It sounds so simple, but it's just like, applying Ethereum in the ways that we have, we've like learned so much. So that's one area where projects that may not be really complete in the philosophical sense, like, are still meaningful because they inform us, and we kind of learn and continue to push the state of the art forward through those kind of learning by doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's that design thinking that you need to have in terms of thinking about this technology, and recognizing that it needs to be it's an iterative process of progress to improvement.
Yeah, and I think the folks who have those applied projects under their belt are the folks who are going to begin to differentiate themselves from the there's just an end to talking about it. And I think Ethereum specifically, it's like having gone through it, I feel like I learned as much as I could until I needed to try it.
Okay, got it. Makes sense.
We, in Franklin County, we engaged with the auditor and brought 5 project ideas. Imagine a PowerPoint slide with like 5 slides. They had followed a template, like, here's a project idea, here's another project idea. It had like pros and cons, and sort of like, here are the departments that need to be involved. And then we listened. And it was someone in the office who ultimately suggested the annual forfeiture sale. So that was another, which I feel like as consultants, like, there's still a ton of value there too, which is around priming the pump a little bit with like, here are some concepts, and then just like allowing the client to effectively express like their pain points, and then finding a way to hone in on, well, here's this compliance need that you could replace with a blockchain-backed database. Meant that the whole office was really leaned in and engaged throughout the 4 months we were there. And another just thing to think about, those are just tried and true. You just need to do those anyways. But I think sometimes people are like, oh, I know better because I'm doing blockchain.
Right. So that's interesting. Can you talk a little bit more about those 5 project ideas? How'd that come about? Because you mentioned that's a great onboarding for a consultant. You mentioned compliance controls being definitely a place where blockchain could be applied. So we'd be looking at those types of industries and that have those types of transactions and those types of needs. How did that project?
Yeah, well, I'll give you 2 use cases. So one that we didn't do, but I think was a reasonable application of blockchain, is that in most counties, the local newspaper will publish recent transfers. So, like on Sundays in the back of the paper, you'll see like all the houses that were bought and sold in the last 7 days. In most places, that's a legal requirement that the auditor announce publicly about a conveyance. So like, and there's a delay often, it could be set 24 to 7 days, 24 hours or 1 to 7 days before like the information is sort of announced or posted. With blockchain, you could combine the act of conveyance with communicating that it happened. So those 2 events are effectively the same when you're on a shared ledger.
Yeah, right.
So that's one use case. I have another one. If you can see my screen, my webcam, this is a sticker. It's a label that we place on a deed.
Yes.
This label is a PDF 417 barcode that links to a smart contract address. So I can take and scan this piece of paper, take its like digital copy, put it on blockchain, get back the address of where it is on blockchain, put it on a label, stick it on the original document, file it away, and then interact with the digital document going forward. So if ever anybody was like, well, what about this physical copy? like, it's fine, you know, like you can put this in a locker somewhere, you can put it wherever you want. But if you really want to know where it ended up, like if it was ever recorded, if it ever received the engineer's stamp, if it ever was like rejected,
Yeah.
you know, scan the barcode, look at the smart contract.
Oh, my
So
goodness.
like in a general way, I would describe that as kind of like taking physical things,
Yes.
kind of making them digital
Yes.
and bridging the gap. I think there's opportunity for that as well.
Oh my goodness, I am so glad you showed that. You know, I've heard of, you know, the application of, you know, blockchain for tracking fruits and vegetables and things like that, you know, from
Mm-hmm.
seed to sale, like the thing. So and looking at the paper, you know, that really brings it to life. I'm excited about the application for a business, you know, and a business application, because it makes sense to me in terms of agriculture, that kind of stuff. Now, here's the thing now, because you know, obviously we've been talking about eliminating paper since the first computer, you know, so,
Sure.
you know, we got the barcode on paper now still. So do you think we'll ever really get rid of paper?
Oh man, yeah, because you know you think about
Yeah.
like microfiche, you know,
Right.
Right.
like when the
Yeah.
first copier came out, you know, like
Right.
the you know the technological wonder of like carbon copies, you know.
Right.
Um, like one thing that I think yeah, I don't think will ever be done. I mean, I feel like technology, you know, is a genuine curiosity. You know, I think that there'll always be better ways. And like so for example, I think this was a fun one. You know, there's a every property has a legal description. This one is a fake legal description, but it's like on the deed for your property. It'll
Oh yeah,
it
the
could
plat number. Yeah, I see it.
yeah yeah
Yeah.
being lot number, you know,
Yes,
on
yes,
plat book on page.
yes.
Um, so it's one like we can do natural language processing of legal descriptions and extract kind of the interesting bits out of a legal description.
Okay.
But it kind of begs the question. It's like wouldn't a legal description be better if it was just like a contract address to a token that had all those interesting bits in it? Like my legal description should be a hexadecimal 0x57 whatever that references a location of something that I own, like on a distributed blockchain.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, that feels a little science fiction to me. Like I don't think people are quite ready for that.
Oh yeah, I don't think so either. Because yeah, they need to be able to look at their paper and know what's going on, as
Mhm.
opposed to have to go to an exchange and try to figure out what's the what there. Yeah. But that's a whole lot of education that I guess that's where we come in. You
Yeah, and
know?
that's where paper begins to almost like, I mean, it's one thing to scan this, make a PDF, put it on IPFS and store its location on a smart contract. It's another to say like, why do we even have deeds? You know, like
Yeah.
is just having possession of this tokenized asset like sufficient to prove that, you know, I own it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just interesting, you know. So yeah, I think we'll never be done, you know.
Yeah, probably quite some years out, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, kind of. Did you want to see? You look like you're excited about something, Eric. There. Did you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say this because this is something that I saw. You know, I was reading your blog, and it was just, to me, it was really comical. And it was on. You wrote a blog post on pay matching, and
Yeah.
in the blog post, you cited Brad Sherman, and you called Brad Sherman a forward-thinking individual. I thought that was funny. And you know why I'm laughing at it is because Brad Sherman is a congressman in California, and he is very anti everything blockchain technology, cryptocurrency.
Almost.
And it was funny that you
Uh-huh.
cited him as someone forward-thinking. So
There you go.
That's funny.
Yeah, you know, it's all about those partnerships, and you know, we you know, especially with, you know, local politics, it's all right here in our backyard. So I think maintaining those relationships, letting people know that, I mean, we're here with a true, you know, like you can't fake partnership, you know, like people, I think, especially in executive positions, are kind of like in those positions because they can smell a lie, you know.
yes.
We really do. We were like, hey, you know, we actually spoke to the County Recorders Association in Ohio, and somebody spoke up and said, it sounds like you're trying to put us all out of jobs.
Yes.
Like, you know, The reality is, like I can say honestly, which I don't necessarily feel great saying it, but I mean, if we can make a more efficient process in the recorder's office, like they get to keep more of their fees, like I don't have a problem with that. I mean, make more money. I mean, I just want to write like the type of software for real estate and title that I think we deserve, which is more efficient, and it should be faster and cheaper and more secure,
Right. Sure.
So here's me kind of taking us off a little bit. I know that you presented at the most recent Blockland conference there in Cleveland.
Yep.
What were your biggest takeaways from that wildly successful conference? My goodness, it was sold out.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that it did feel very successful. I think there was a very strong. Essentially, there's this guy in Cleveland, Danny Marino, who's
car salesman guy.
Yeah, he's got lots of money and lots of influence, and I think that there are some political folks there who, if he asks them to show up, they will, because he's like a big donor. So I think he's kind of like Dan Gilbert of Quicken Loans in Detroit. It's like folks who have influence, like AKA power, like they wielded it effectively to put together, and they took a big risk. I mean, I think that was sold out. They took a big risk. They had I heard 1,000 volunteers, so like the community really turned out, and there was everybody from all like we've hosted Ethereum meetups in Columbus. I feel like maybe 5% of the people who show up are software developers. But I think like 100% of the people who show up think it's going to be like all software developers, So I think getting over like, actually our CEO and co-founder has said this, which is that, he doesn't know how an automatic transmission works, but he knows how to like the benefits of it, So it's like to get people to show up and participate because they understand how to apply the technology without feeling like that they need to really understand all the bits and pieces is sort of an area where I think we've yet to bridge that gap. But, at Blockland, I think everybody showed up, and that was great. It was a good community. But yeah, it was kind of a unique series of things that came together, I think, to make that work,
Understood. Looks like Shirley wants to jump in.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so first of all, Robert, I want to officially thank you for coming here today. We really appreciate it. I was listening behind the scenes. I was also eating a little lunch here, which is why I was off camera. But one thing that I want everyone who is listening today, because Robert glanced over it, but I honed in on it when he said it, and my ears perked up. He said that his company has an applied case study, and it wasn't case study was the term that you used, but you already had like an application in place. And because of that, it was a safer bet to go with that company versus a company that doesn't have any kind of application being used. So one of the things we talk about in BBC is how people can get blockchain jobs. And it's something that, I think is important for us to think about when we're considering a company is, do they actually have an application that has made its way through a process? If they don't, it doesn't mean that it's bad, but it does mean, or it's not a good job, but it does mean that there's probably a lot more risk than some of the companies out there that are a little bit more proven with a true, applied case study, especially if we're trying to do sales, any kind of sales job or any kind of community management job. That's something that we want to think about as people who are seeking jobs, or even people who are considering taking consulting positions with certain companies. So.
I was asked to review a white paper for a startup, and it had all of the like appearances of like a white paper. It had like the nice cover, like everything. It was like many pages long. Like I think, and then I'm like, well, I'm just gonna read this thing. you know, and there was like a brief mention where like all of this that they intended to do hinged on their ability to like, they called it proof of act. So like you had to essentially prove that somebody like did something. And I'm like, I don't think we've like solved that one yet, you know, like how are you going to do proof of act? And they're like, well, that's something we still have to figure out. And I feel like that's where asking those questions to get to a place where it's like, there's enough interesting work related to blockchain just with its current state. Like, you know, like if you don't have to figure out how to prove that somebody's taking their medication to like actually use it, you know? So
Right.
I think to your earlier point about how to assess projects, but it's also like how to, you know, pitch projects is, to really think within the constraints of what's possible. Cause I mean, it's a brand new world right now when it comes to the application of this interesting technology. So,
I mean, you know, outside of a robot seeing grandma actually take her pill, I don't know if we'll be able to do proof of that either. But, you know, I mean, look, the person who could solve that problem would
maybe that's therein lies the real interesting challenge. So it's like blockchain, like, you know, because if you could have somebody swallow like a RFID along with their pill, and then you can somehow track it
exactly.
Well,
But I think
Rob, you think you've already solved it.
$1 billion idea right there.
I think really.
Internet of Things and a special sensor.
You develop it and we'll sell it for you.
Yeah.
All right.
We heard
So Dr. Keisha, I don't know if you saw, you had a couple of questions.
I was just about to segue to the Q&A piece. Let's see, the first thing someone says here is, this is a great product. Thanks for sharing your experience. Is the product currently serving a few counties within Ohio? And I think you did speak to that.
Yeah, and I put up my Q&A slide because I have it, but that's my business card and that QR code too. So if you guys still have my screen share up, you're welcome to email me, call me, stop by Columbus, and check out our Safechain HQ sometime. But
full invitation, everybody. Do you hear that?
Yeah.
All right, excellent.
Yeah, we have we essentially have two. We have many software components that kind of go into our overall application architecture. The two products we have are SafeWire, which is the secure online portal, or the authentication layer for a broader 30-second property transaction. We also have something we refer to as County Portal. County Portal is sort of the back office government interface to workflow. So in the auditor's office, as I mentioned, the auditor, the engineer, the recorder, like they're kind of passing paper around. If we can digitize that, track it, and sort of enforce certain controls using a smart contract, the counties interact with County Portal to do that. So we have that like effectively live in 4 counties, or at least have had pilots related to the County Portal project in 4 counties. So for example, the Franklin County auditor used County Portal to facilitate their annual forfeiture auction sale. We would expect them to use it again, but it's an annual sale, so it's not like they're using it right now. But yeah, Washington County, Warren County, Perry County, those are all counties that we're engaged with. Mostly it starts out as, we had the good fortune to hire a seasoned Accenture management consulting contractor full-time. So we recruited her from Accenture. So we go through, we map their current process, we put it on a big poster, and they're generally like happy that someone's come in and sort of taken their domain knowledge and placed it into a process diagram. And we take it away and we kind of circle areas and ask that question related to really it's controls. So it's a compliance style assessment like a controls officer might do, where you're like, is there an opportunity for technology to replace or just frankly be a control in this process? And we put together a proposal and send it back. So that's kind of our general like county model. As we've been going through Ohio, like county by county, we're kind of building pieces of a larger puzzle that we intend to bring back to Franklin County, kind of assemble here, and then see a 30-second property transaction. So we'll build one component here, one component there, and bring it all back.
Do you have any plans to do anything in Montgomery County?
Actually, Montgomery County was on our list. I think we actually have an MO, like one of these memorandums of understanding, but I don't think we have like a like a active engagement there right now.
That was really personal because I have property there. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I was like, just wanted to find out. Yeah. So I could kind of get right in there, come right down with you in your office when you were working with them. But anyway.
Shame on you, Dr. Keisha, using the session for personal gain. What's the problem?
You know, look out for you.
I know, watch out for me. But there is another question here. It says, when you were building the product, what did it take for you to go from use case identification to secure funding or something else that leads to actual product development? So
I think, you know, at the beginning of the session, we talked about, you know, something, it does feel like something's happening in Columbus, you know, it's still, Ohio's still represented, like Ohio as like the state of Ohio represented 0.6% of all venture capital this year. So it's still like mostly in like Boston and Manhattan and San Francisco and like on the coasts. But we did get to see, you know, 0.6% of it. And it meant that, you know, with a PowerPoint and some credibility, you know, I think we spent time getting our story straight. We worked quickly to put a prototype together. And this is really more of like the Safechain as a company. You know, we burned the midnight oil on Wednesdays and Saturdays, you know, while we worked full-time jobs to get that presentation tight. We pitched to a number of venture capital firms. Ultimately, we pieced together a $3 million seed round from like a series of, you know, bets from big and small investors. You know, it costs money to do that level of socialization too, like plain. So that was our, you know, there was an investment in just kind of getting it bootstrapped and off the ground. But yeah, I'm kind of answering that question to you, like, would be, you know, startup founders in the end. You know, we were within maybe about 6 to 8 months or so, we were able to bring together enough cash to kind of get things started. And we're 34 people now, and it's been like under 2 years.
Impressive.
So, you know, hopefully that answers the question.
All right. I don't know what the time is. My phone is somewhere else. How are we looking on time?
Yeah, we got 2 minutes, so we can do one more question, or if you have any other follow-ups.
Anybody with any follow-up questions? Anybody out in the chat area? Let's see. Chat. I've got nothing in Q&A at this juncture, and nothing.
Did we ask about potentially working with Safechain? Is that up for discussion?
I mean, you know, like part of the reason for me to share what I know and the experience so far is, you know, as you can tell, this is an exciting topic for me, and I thoroughly enjoy talking about it. So, but I also appreciated, you know, I do get a handful of LinkedIn requests and meet a lot of people, and I appreciate the good work that you guys are doing, and I want to be supportive however I can. So I would imagine, like, if you have a way of kind of, maybe you could send me, or we could meet in another meeting to talk about kind of the capabilities of, you know, your group and how you could help. I'd listen. You know, I think at the moment we're mostly all kind of in-house and working on like building the capabilities of this company through just like directly hiring people. But yeah, I'd certainly be open to hearing, you know, what you guys offer.
So if there's somebody listening today that has a special affinity for a project like this, please reach out to Eric and let him know, you know, what you're thinking, et cetera. And then we want to connect with Robert, maybe in the new year. Eric and Dr. Keisha will connect with Robert and, you know, see what we can do.
Okay. Uh-oh, looks like we have one more question, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
fine by me.
It says here, what kind of infrastructure requirements do we need for a startup project?
Yeah, I was just sort of thinking like, so not necessarily for a startup, but like more for like a startup project. So say you're like working with a client and the client's like, hey, I want to learn by doing. We've got a couple different use cases we've been kicking around, and we think we have a good one here. Let's put together, let's time box, like say a 3-month engagement where you guys can work with the developers. You can do a blockchain POC, you know, let's summarize our findings and then all learn something. The technology that the software we use is Ethereum. So, there are many different blockchain vendors effectively. I mean, most of them are open source, but Ethereum is the one that seems to be kind of the most well sort of supported from the open source community and its capabilities and sort of stability. So we made a decision. One day we may change that decision, but for now, we're so if that's helpful, we did a vendor bake-off and sort of had a matrix of its different capabilities and settled on Ethereum. Once you have Ethereum, like you can run Ethereum on a laptop. I mean, you could run Ethereum on a Amazon virtual computer. Like Ethereum's hardware requirements are like not necessarily any more like special than any other type of server hardware. So a nice laptop. And then we used Python as our computer programming language. Python has a library called Web3Py, which makes it pretty easy to talk to Ethereum. We just had a workshop in Columbus on building REST services around Web3 using Python and Django. So those are all like specific technologies, but we've had great luck with it. Like, so for example, we're not like a .NET or Java, we're using Python, Django, Web3, Ethereum. And all that said, I mean, like literally somebody who has done it before, like me, like I could take those technologies and sort of piece them together, and it's not that big of a lift. Like, our workshop that we ran in Columbus was, I think, 4 hours. And by the end of it, the folks there all had their own Django REST framework, Python libraries talking to Ethereum. They were able to claim a Columbus token. So that's not high level. It was actually pretty low level. Hopefully that's helpful.
Well, and since you've talked about Python, many of us have taken the Python course or at least attempted it. I know I attempted it and I didn't go all the way through, but because I'm totally not a developer, I'm not. Do you have I think I asked this early on. That was my last question I wanted to ask you though.
Oh, sure.
How would you suggest, a non-developer kind of jump in with, into the blockchain space, basically?
Well, I do think that, if with a background in compliance,
okay,
or a background in law, those are two specific skill sets that I think it's back to like kind of systems thinking. It's like those are the sort of the skills that one kind of channels when writing smart contracts or when trying to figure out where to apply smart contracts.
Okay.
Compliance is often learned or through working at a big company. I'm not necessarily sure how one would learn. But like at JP Morgan, there was like a role called a controls officer. Like their job was to either document a process or like read a process and find out where there were gaps in that process. And then they would write up sort of like a gap analysis and then create a new process that had those gaps mitigated. Like that's like all blockchain all the time. Like when it comes to these big companies and their or government, where there's 30,000 compliance officers, like there's a use case for blockchain. And then I think, frankly, being able to tell the story, as I'm sure, you guys are all experienced professionals, like that's often differentiates people is to say things like, well, we can talk about blockchain as anarchy, or we can talk about blockchain as a database. Like, let's talk about blockchain as a database, and if you want to go out and get drinks and we can get nuts about blockchain as an anarchy, like that's fine. But like
governance and all of that, right?
To help kind of guide the conversation towards what ultimately, I do think we effectively worked with the Franklin County Auditor to get to a place where they knew enough to say like, hey, I've got an idea. And that idea meant that they were eager to come to meetings. They were eager to lean in. Like it wasn't my idea, Rob Zwinck idea. It was like the auditor's idea. So I feel like telling that story is still a very valuable skill set. In the end, it's like a type of database. I don't think you necessarily have to know how Oracle RAC cluster lock management needs to work in order to convince somebody that they need a relational database, so.
Understood. Okay, I got you. Yep, very good. All right, well, I think that's it. I'm good.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, thanks for all your time and thanks for the invitation. This has been great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for responding to my my LinkedIn request. I got to tell you, I'm an educator, and digital literacy and digital readiness is my thing, you know, just, you know, in general. And I'm just always so excited about being able to have lived in this time where I can just pick up the mouse and, you know, do a search and see who's somebody I want to meet and just reach on out, and then people respond. I am so thankful for you. So thank you so much for your time, Robert. I really do appreciate it. And go Ohio. My goodness.
Yeah.
That's from somebody from Michigan. You know how Michigan and Ohio have a little issue there, but
one
go
love.
Ohio.
All right.
Yeah, one love, exactly. All right. Thank you so much for everybody who's participating. And again, this is Black Blockchain Consultants. This is what we do. We reach out to people in the blockchain space, and this is for the purpose of giving you understanding about where you can fit in with your existing skill set. So thanks so much for your time this afternoon, or morning, or in the different time zones that people are reaching out to. And thanks so much. All right, bye-bye for now, you guys. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Robert.
Thanks, Robert.